friends. Thank you all for coming tonight. You're in for a treat. Our speaker tonight is Matthew Flower, also known as Machine Dazzle. He has been living and working in New York City since 1994. An artist, costume designer, set designer, singer-songwriter, art director, maker, and all-around creative. Dazzle has worked with many from the New York downtown scene and beyond. He is a 2022 United States Artists Fellow. He describes himself as a radical, queer, emotionally driven, instinct-based concept artist and thinker. And for those in the New York City area, please avail yourself of the opportunity to go to the Museum of Arts and Design, where his very first museum survey exhibition, Queer Maximalism, is now open at the museum at Columbus Circle. And it's a stunning exhibition. It's quite overwhelming. And without further ado, I introduce with pleasure, Machine Dazzle.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here. I'm coming to you from Sonoma, California, where I have a residency on a farm, Haystack Farm. This is my my uniform on the farm. Usually some kind of a button-down shirt with a DIY Haystack Farm t-shirt on top of it. And it does get sunny here, and I put my sun hat away. But you know, regular, like just like everything has paint stains on it, and I'm usually in some kind of like Birkenstocks in this situation. I lament the coming of winter because I don't like to cover my feet to keep my, feet, warm. I'm like a little more hippie. I'm very like, I love the air and whatever. Anyway, so here I am in Sonoma, California, and I guess I'm going to talk about me really quick. Although you kind of did a really great job already, Robin, so thank you for that intro. I have been living in New York since 1994, and I got my start experimenting on my own body, forms of drag. I would say it's kind of like genderless drag in a way. I wasn't going for like any kind of gender illusion or whatever. I didn't really care about gender. I would just make things that fit the body that I had. I wouldn't, put in like, fake breasts, for example. I wouldn't like pad out my hips or, tuck anything here or there. I would just use the body that I had and experimenting with that. And that's something to know about me. I'm very experimental in almost everything that I do.
Machine, can I interrupt?
Yeah.
Should we show some pictures? Should we?
Oh, hell yeah. Let's go to the first slide. Oh, yeah. So everybody, we're doing a slideshow. I hope that's okay.
And then you can
get my face out of there. And I'm drinking rosé.
Your face will still be, it will be your face and the pictures. You'll be both of it. So we'll ask Robin to share this screen, and then keep on talking, please.
Yeah. Anyway, where was I? Well, maybe the first slide will like inspire me to say the next thing. What's the first slide?
Coming up in 1 second.
Oh,
Here
okay,
we
there we are. Oh, with beard, about 5 years ago. This is a picture of me in the basement of Neiman Marcus in San Francisco. When I was there with Taylor Mack with our 24-decade history of popular music, and they, in advance of the show at the Curran Theater, they allowed me to put in some costumes into their beautiful windows, which was the first time that they had ever given up their windows for non-retail reasons. Although it was to help sell tickets down the street at the Curran Theater. But I do love mannequins. I've loved mannequins my whole life. I love how expressive they are. I kind of grew up in the age of like the 70s and the 80s, which is kind of like the height of these like amazing mannequin displays. I mean, the only one who's really still doing anything great, really, really great, I think is, Bergdorf Goodman in New York City. I've been all over. I'm so like, anyway. I loved the mannequins from back in the day. Let's go to the next one. I'd make wearable art. Okay, let's talk about where I came from. So that's right. There I was experimenting on myself. And I had some friends of mine form a performance group, a downtown performance group troupe called the Dazzle Dancers. And something that people often ask me is the origin of my name, Machine Dazzle. So I'm about to tell you. Back in the 90s, when I first moved, before I was Machine Dazzle, I would go clubbing and I was a dancer. And my friends called me the dancing machine. And then there was a machine. And then after a few more years, it was just, machine. And because I was just the way I moved, it reminded them of a machine. So my friends formed this dance group and they all had Dazzle names. The blonde in the front is Cherry Dazzle. To her left is Robbie Dazzle. To her right is Vinny Dazzle. And then there's Edible Dazzle. And let's go up for there's Besa May Dazzle. There's Chunky Cupcake Dazzle, Dazzle Dancer, Dazzle, excuse me. There's me kind of with my elbow up at the top. And below me, Pretty Boy Dazzle, Soshni Dazzle. And there is Dazani Propecia Destiny Dazzle. Anyway, I was already Machine, so I became Machine Dazzle. And during this time, we were very popular downtown. We were performing, multiple times a week. And I started making costumes for other people on the downtown scene, but I was always billed as Machine Dazzle of the Dazzle Dancers. Well, years went by and the Dazzle Dancers, we kind of stopped dazzling out. And I had already been in print in the Wall Street Journal, The Voice, the New York Times as Machine Dazzle. So I just kept it as a professional name, even though the Dazzle Dancers, we haven't really dazzled since 2008. Although at my opening on September 8th, it was the first reunion since 2008 and all of the Dazzles flew in from wherever they were living in the United States and beyond and came together and danced. And that was really beautiful. Next slide, please. That's the origin of my name. Oh, so here's some Machine Dazzle stuff. There's there was a scene over there on the left is a scene from the Deitch Projects Art Parade. There's me in one of my creations. I had a way of showing up to the club. I had a full-time day job during this time, so there wasn't a lot of time to sew and do whatever. I would leave work. I would go to a fabric store right before it closed. I would buy fabric and I would show up to the club and I would make costumes without a sewing machine. It's just, I would cut strips and I would get elastic. And as you can see, on my own body there, and just wrap it around myself and just make it tight to fit the body. And I would do it's kind of this kind of couture kind of way of doing things without a sewing machine. Thank God for stretch fabric. That's all I have to say. Next slide. So here's me. I like to take my art to the streets. I really love it. I love, telling stories out in the streets. So any parades, public gatherings are a really great place to tell your story and, just, be and have people appreciate what you do. So on the left here, that's the Easter Bonnet Parade. And I'm going to say that's maybe 2017, maybe. You can't see a lot of the costume, but up on top, you can see, what were we doing? I was kind of reacting. This was definitely kind of reacting to Donald Trump a little bit. And I put little clowns on top of those fake cupcakes that I had made. And I forget, I think that was some kind of a vintage hat and I mixed all of these little things in there. On the back of the bonnet is actually cupcakes with little skull and crossbones and whatever. And that's actually a turtle shell that I'm wearing down below, which you can see at the museum if you go, but now it's all painted in red, white, and blue. And I ended up wearing it on, 4th of July on another occasion. On the right, this is classic me at the Mermaid Parade. I'm gonna say this was maybe 2010, maybe. And so I have this really hardcore skull cap on my head, which is holding this bicycle wheel which was really on an axle that turned, and all of these fish were on the spokes. And you know, I kind of have like a whole lot of stuff going on here. But I was kind of like an underwater sea fantasy kind of, I don't know, some kind of like uh, something like psychedelic underwater dream, you know, that flew out of the Titanic, you know, that kind of a thing. That's my friend Simon next to me. He made his own costume, but yeah, I will say that I do like to make costumes that have noise in the wind or, and, you know, walking around. And this is an example of one of those. Just those beautiful mother of pearl discs were just like, they had a way of clinking together that was very satisfying while I was walking down Mermaid Avenue in Coney Island. Next slide, please. Oh, more examples of Mermaid Parade. So Mermaid Parade, God, I don't know. The years escape me. Maybe like 2011, and then maybe like 2012, maybe. You know, on the extreme left, a deep sea diver. What you're not seeing is my prop. I was kind of like a bottom feeder, and I had like a broom and a dustpan, and I was actually sweeping up debris from the parade as I was walking on the parade. I was very proud of myself for that one. This one I got photographed, so I always get photographed a lot, but for some reason this was particularly striking, and I like how that could be anybody. Like, you can't really tell who it is. You know, the only reason I know it's me is because I know it was me. And then on the extreme right, there's me. I did this kind of deconstructed seashell, and I was like a snail coming out of it. I use that reflective fabric. I forget the term, but if you used a flash on your camera, it would have like completely like glowed. It's, you know, it's that stuff. Anyway, I really loved that costume. Oh, I love the Mermaid Parade. I haven't been in a few years, I have to admit, and that's both COVID related and just busy these days. I don't have the time that I used to have. Right dead center, this is a look that I wore to the first ever Reclaim Pride march, the Queer Liberation March, excuse me, in 2019. And this is a movement, an initiative to kind of take back the original roots of what we now know as the Gay Pride Parade. The roots of Gay Pride Parade, it was not a parade, it was a march. And so I really enjoyed being part of that on the same day as Gay Pride in New York City. But we took to the streets, and we started in the Village and walked up to Central Park, which is actually what they used to do back in the day. And there I am, it's kind of like this psychedelic queer version of Lady Liberty herself, who's one of my favorite fictional characters of all time. I wrote a song, actually, no, I didn't know. I wrote a song about blind justice, and she was singing to herself about how she doesn't really exist. When something works out in our favor, we call it justice, but the truth is, in real life, justice doesn't really exist. And neither does liberty, but we fight for it anyway. I've so conflicting feelings about Lady Liberty. I do love her as a beautiful, ideal. Next slide, please. Okay. Well, I don't know what you were doing during the pandemic, but I just happened to have a boyfriend with a nice wallet at the time, and I love Andrew, but we are no longer together. But something that did happen is I lost all of my work. I was in the middle of, actually, we had just opened The Fray, which was it's a Taylor Mack play, and it was at the Flea Theater. And we were 2 weeks into previews when COVID hit and everything closed all of a sudden. And, this is something that really affected everyone that I know. But after about sitting in the apartment for 3 weeks, Andrew and I, Andrew asked, do you want to go to Maui? He knew someone else going, and I'm like, do I want to go to Maui? I had nothing to lose and everything to gain, so there I was. But you know, I can't sit still. I need to be creative. I truly am a workaholic. I try to keep it on the healthy side of workaholic. So I was in this beautiful place. The relationship was actually falling apart. Sometimes I wonder if that's why I did this. You know, emotionally driven. Uh, so we were staying on this beautiful property, as you can see. Now, when we were there, this wasn't touristy Maui. The beaches were closed, businesses were closed, people were isolating in their homes. And that's what we did on this property. But there were a lot of, there was, as you can see, there was, you know, palm trees and a lot of other vegetation on the property. And I was just so taken with how fast things grew and they fell. And I'm obsessed with how palm trees grow, you know, kind of like right out of the center, and then they like fall off, and then the, you know, the older ones fall off eventually. And I don't know, I'm just fascinated. And so all of these palm fronds were available to me, and leaves and other things after a rain or a wind, all of these leaves. So I was just so inspired, and it had been so long. I've been in New York, you know, so many years. We really don't have the sense of nature that people do, like in places like, yeah, let's say Sonoma, where I am now, or in Hawaii, or in the mountains, or wherever. And I think it was just time that I, you know, it was really wonderful to use truly organic materials. And I did like the best, like there's no hot glue on this. I think some of these things are stapled, some of them are hand sewn. I managed to get to a store that had, you know, needle and thread. I didn't bring anything with me. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. But all of this vegetarian was right, vegetation, excuse me, was right off of the land, and I made a whole book about it. And actually, you can buy the book if you want to. It's available at the shop at NAD. It's called Maui Masks Machine. And you can also see some of the pictures on my Instagram if you go back far enough. But anyway, and most of these were self-portraits. Andrew took a few of the pictures, and I set up my camera on like chairs, leaning them against pillows, and I press the 10-second thing, and I just get into my pose. And okay, well, anyway, that's enough of Maui. Next slide. Oh, so this is a series that I started last year when I first started coming to Sonoma for this kind of ongoing residency that we have here. And I did the exact same thing, only I was on a farm in California, not in Hawaii. They dry flowers here on the farm. It's a really wonderful farm. It's all charity based. They have a complete biodynamic vegetable farm and flower farm. And all of the vegetables and flowers go to food pantries for people in need. I really especially love the flower bit because, you know, most people, you know, can't afford flowers. But when they go and pick up their fresh vegetables from a farm, they can also get a gorgeous bouquet of flowers that would probably go for $50 in San Francisco or in New York or wherever. And I would find my garments locally. On the left, that's a pair of curtains that I stitched together. And just like, it's really all about the draping and the styling. And that Boca de Veritas pendant it's like some kind of a wall hanging that obviously someone bought in Rome, and there it was in the thrift store. I really do love recycling. I prefer recycling and using secondhand materials. I prefer it more than like going fabric shopping. I go into fabric stores and I get depressed actually, because I feel like I'm just surrounded by all of this new, dead, future landfill. And if I can reuse something, it just makes me feel a little bit better about that. So on the left, I'm wearing curtains, and on the right, just a series of scarves and jewelry that were available to me at this local thrift store. If you're in Sonoma, I love the Bon Marché thrift store. I haven't been yet this trip. This is only my third day in. But anyway, I loved this series, and I'm going to try and do some more of those while I'm here. I'm here for another 3 weeks right now. Next slide, please. Oh, so you're looking at 4 amazing superstars right now. And I have a really fun story about the one kind of in the center, but let's start on the extreme left. I get asked to make things, like private commissions, special things, often. And it's really one of my favorite things to be asked to do something. It's just, it gives me purpose. And I love it. So extreme left is our Lordess and Savior, Justin Vivian Bond. And if you don't know who they are, I suggest looking them up immediately and running to the next show. I know right now that she's in London with Anthony Roth Costanzo, and they're going to do a run of their show called An Octave Apart, which was they did fall of last year at St. Anne's Warehouse. Anyway, I've worked with Viv for many years doing many things. I've made them costumes for various things. We have performed together in cabarets. Here, Viv is the only person that I actually costumed for my opening at the Museum of Arts and Design on September 8th. And, I just wanted something fun and beautiful and just kind of fantastic and easy. I wanted her to be the star. And I found that amazing $200 a yard fabric at Mood. And then, I lined it with something unusual, like a t-shirt. It's like a thin jersey underneath. So it's like kind of like dress it up. You can but it feels like you're dressing it down. In the exhibits at MAD, there are a couple outfits that Viv lent to the museum. One of them we call the pooped out party dress, and it's really not dress material. It's more of a millinery material. At least it was back in the day, like 15 years ago when I made it. It's a net. It's like a rhinestone netting. Now you find that stuff all over the place. Back then, it was there was the only one option. You get it at like these millinery stores. And it's like sewn together, or rather attached together with balloons, or balloon string with balloons attached to them, as if you had taken this net and kind of wrapped around the body and literally attached it. Like all of the seams are tied with balloon string with like balloons on them. And all of the original balloons are still there. They are deflated pieces of latex, and they're weird and squiggly. And I love what happens when nature has its way with our everyday objects. And then the other dress that's on display there is a bit more interesting. Probably back in 2010 or 11, when all of a sudden it became an issue what bathrooms transgendered people or non-binary people were going to use. And so many people are in an uproar. And I mean, these days, I think we figured it out. You use the bathroom that is you most identify with, and don't nobody else have a problem with it. But back then, this was we were in the height of it. And so I took adults X-rated material. I took transsexual X-rated porn magazines, and I cut them into rectangles, and then I cut out the shape of like the little man symbol that you would see on a bathroom. And then I laminated the whole thing with like glitter, and then I just had like a lot of them. So it's kind of like this fluttery thing. And I had just attached them to this kind of, again, netting. I love netting because there's so many different ways to use it and attach things to it. It's almost like you're weaving. It's almost like you're making your own fabric, but with like objects, just simply because you're tying things and weaving things in and out of it. That's something that I do all the time. I've been doing it for years. Anyway, thank you, Viv. The next one is right at the top. That's Dion von Furstenberg. And she first contacted me in January of 2019. And it's like, I'm going to the Met Gala. The theme is camp, and I want to go as the Statue of Liberty. And the reason she did is because she's the one who opened the Statue of Liberty Museum, which you can look at, which is very beautiful. And she was privy to many photographs that had never been seen before, up close, documentative. And she had me over for lunch, and we got the process started. And this is the first time that I ever had to hire someone else to really help me with this, because I knew she wanted real quality. She didn't want cardboard and glitter. She wanted something that was very unique. And so I worked with a 3D artist to take, to really create a 2-scale Liberty Crown and torch. And it was took a long time and it was very expensive. But I love the results and she was very happy. And I remember when I came in with the first prototype, she got really excited. She's like, oh, this is much better than I thought it was going to be. And as you can see, it really looks like the authentic thing, because they were taken, I worked with the 3D designer to really I want all of the details. I mean, this is not something that you can get in, a Halloween shop or online. It is a 2-scale, all of the details of the torch are in there. All of the details of the crown are in there. And then I helped her with the dress selection. We went, I was at her studio and we went down and she was like, well, aren't we going to do like green? I was like, no, we're not doing green. And she took me down to this place where she had her fabrics and she showed me the fabric she's wearing, which is this chiffon that has Andy Warhol's photograph of her that was on Interview magazine back in the late 70s. Printed on it. So that's what she kind of wore herself. So that's kind of like, the camp element. And she had an amazing story about that. While I was sitting there and she was getting dressed, it was an amazing thing. I was sitting in her dressing room. She was in her underwear. She was getting her makeup on and the crown had to be incorporated into the hair so you could like hide how it's being attached. So I was there and I was there early in the day. And she told me she got a phone call from her brother reminding her of this very interesting, haunting reunion on that day of the Met Gala. Literally, I guess, oh God, what would it have been? 75 years? No. To the day, it was the anniversary of her mother being taken to Auschwitz. Diane von Furstenberg's mother was taken to Auschwitz, obviously survived, but however many years later, on the date, she was going to the Met Gala representing freedom. And I just, I got chills and it was like, it made the whole experience so much more. Clockwise going down, Cara Delevingne. This is a really funny story. I was sitting at a bar with my partner then, Andrew. This was 3 days before the Met Gala. I still hadn't finished Diane's crown and torch because like timing, it took, and I got a call from my producing partners, Pomegranate Arts. It's like, Machine, we know you're busy. We have a last minute request. And I'm like, okay. Do you know the model Cara Delevingne? And I'm like, oh, I think the name is familiar, but I had been out of fashion for years at this point. And I was like, which model is it? So as I was talking to them, I was like, Andrew, could you punch in the name and Cara Delevingne? And then of course, he punches it in and shows me the image on her phone, and it was Cara. So I said, oh my God, it's only the most famous model in the world at the moment. So I was like, okay, well, what's she wearing? What's the deal? And they sent me the picture of this cute little striped Dior dress. And I was like, okay, it's like candy. It's very French. It's, bonbons. And so I immediately started like just designing it in my head. And I literally made that crown out of things that were already in my studio. And I never met Cara. I met her hairdresser, who was the one who hired me. And the only rule was, well, Cara wants something that's kind of like open. She wants to feature the long ponytail in the back. And so this is what I came up with. And I wanted something surreal and like kind of like in bad taste, but artful, but kind of in good taste at the same time. And just, playful. And it's like, what's going on there? The bananas being replaced by fingers. I mean, there's like, what's that like, coming out of the flowers? And it's like, what's up with these, teeth? And then like the egg on the side. And something that most people have never seen is the back. And in the back, there's actually this beautiful like heart painted like a sunset. And there's two like little motorcycles that have kind of like fallen in love. Anyway, I wanted to borrow that for my exhibit, but Cara is very hard to get in touch with. So it's okay. The show is amazing without it. And then finally here, I know I'm talking a lot, but there's only so little I can say without, giving you, anyway. So it's funny that this picture is here because you're looking at a picture of Carol Shorenstein Hayes, who owns the Curran Theater in San Francisco. The Curran Theater in San Francisco is like a Broadway touring house. It is a beautiful, beautiful theater. I was introduced to the Curran when I was with Taylor Mack, and we brought part of the 24, we're going to get to this, our famous show, 24-hour, 24 Decades, History of Popular Music. The Curran Theater was under construction during that time. So we were workshopping the first 6 hours of the show. And so we brought it because we were doing a workshop and the Curran was under construction. It only made sense that, combine the two. The audience, like all of the seating was taken out. The whole house was filled with scaffolding all the way up to the ceiling because they were redoing the ceiling. This picture is, we were literally, I could touch the floor with my hand. That's where, if you've been to the Curran Theater, there's this famous, beautiful chandelier that hangs right from this spot. That's how far the scaffolding went all the way up. And so Carol had this idea to do this photo shoot to document this moment in the Curran's history. Excuse me. And so I just gathered all of these things literally from the construction site and from the old Curran that were being discarded. So those are like that whole fluffy bit, it's plastic tarps. That's actually duct tape lining it all so you can like really see the shapes. She's wearing one of the old no, actually it's not a curtain, that was a pillowcase. The dress is made out of this pillowcase that was in like the green room or whatever. And there's all of this other stuff that, to go in, but we did several looks, and it was just, I don't know, it was a really wonderful project, and it documented the moment, and I will forever love the Curran. But Carol Shorenstein Hayes owns the farm that I'm working on now in Sonoma. So that's the connection. Anyway, okay, next slide. Oh my God, where are we? We're gonna run out of time. I highly encourage you to go to New York and see the show so you can see this in person. Also in 2019 was a busy year. In the spring, an artist, Natasha Bowden, invited me to come down. She was inviting artists to activate her installation. You can see behind the models, there's like these wild shapes, floral, foliage, whatever, very cartoony. She was inviting artists to come and activate her installation, musicians, dancers, puppeteers. I went down for a site visit and I'm like, oh, we're doing like a fashion show. I want moving bodies. I want fantasy. I want camouflage. I basically wanted to bring her vision like alive. And so I got fabrics that matched the exact colors. If you look, I mean, I matched the exact colors of her. This is not retouched. The exact colors of her installation. And then I have like this whole fashion show, but it was more like a performance. Actually, they all had puppets. We actually did the show 3 times in a row, but to 3 different songs, everyone taking layers off at the same time, or, for each one. It was a really fun thing. And all of my best work, and I think most gratifying work, has really come out of collaborating with other people and shared visions. And this is the perfect example of that. Next slide. Oh, okay, Taylor Mack, my bestie, my number one, my toast, and my butter. Here's me and Taylor Mack. This was this San Francisco. The Curran Theater had commissioned us to make a music video advertising our 24-decade history of popular music show. And that's me after spending an all-nighter, like to sleep, like finishing both of Taylor's costumes. Let's go to the next slide because there's a lot to say about Taylor Mack. Okay, so I first met Taylor Mack in the early 2000s, although I think it's possible I met him in the late 90s, but I don't really remember really, interacting with him until the early 2000s when George W. Bush was president, and there was a lot of activism in our downtown community, particularly in post 9/11 New York, which if you weren't in New York at that time, maybe you could imagine just, things kind of like come to a halt. Similar to the pandemic in a way, but just different, but in a worse way. And you know, nobody went to work. Things were closed. Phones didn't work. You know, it was like, and it was a process for Lower Manhattan to like come back alive. And there was anger. You know, people were sad, but no one's gonna stop a New Yorker. Anyway, that's when a large part of my activism really started happening. I'll never forget that day. And when I was like, wow, this is really scary. And I really, I really try not to take anything for granted, but I realized just how much I took for granted on that day in New York. And I was like, wait, I can't go to, I can't go to work. Wait, I can't do anything. My phone wasn't working. I was just, you could like, the trains were down. It was kind of scary. Anyway, I think about that moment all the time. And in the clubs, as the downtown was coming back to life, this is how I met Taylor. And I was involved with the Dazzle dancers heavily then. And Taylor was, gluing interesting things to his face and painting his head like stark white and rhinestones on the eyes and wearing literally like garbage and stuff. And was often on the same bill, performing in the same bars, the same queer spaces. And so, of course, we took a liking to each other, and we started collaborating. The very first major collaboration we did was the Lily's Revenge, which is over on the right there, or I'm sorry, on the left. Two different versions of that. One was earlier, one was later. But that was, back then, it was like a 5-hour show. And each hour was a different act. And each act had a different director. And the whole thing had like 40 performers. And I was the costume designer for all of it. And I had a full-time day job. And that show nearly killed me. It was actually more difficult. It was way more difficult than doing the 24 Decades show. More I can say about that, but we'll move on. And on the right, this is a show that we did afterwards called Walk Across America for Mother Earth. It's a play that Taylor wrote, and it's about something that really happened, about these activists that really walked from the East Coast to a nuclear power plants out, closer to the West, like maybe Nevada, maybe. And all of the things that happened along the way, and about how activists are just as human as anybody else, making mistakes. And people died, someone was raped, it was like, they were all like marching for this cause, but along the way, it's like people are people, and people are extremely flawed, even people who have good intentions. That was my takeaway from it. It was at La Mama, and that was probably in 2011, maybe 2011. Okay, continue. And now here we are. 24-decade history of popular music, a show that we toured all over the world, and we still continue to tour. Our abbreviated, but we call it the abridged, 24-decade abridged show. Originally, it was a 24-hour show. We go through American history, starting in 1776, and we focus on different populations that were being torn apart. I will say, I can't speak completely for Taylor, but I will say that, and so we were on the half decade, 1776 to 1786. That's the first decade. And on the left, that's the opening costume. And just to clue you in to how I design, I'm I like storytelling. This is my version of historic costume. And because I know that most costume designers would, probably try to replicate what they really wore. But I feel like I wanted to be, queer, and I wanted to represent the queer thinkers who are not in the history books, because we sure do have plenty of the rest of it. Just so you know, my definition of the costume on the left is: Betsy Ross had an illegitimate trans child who ran away from home to New Orleans and opened a laundromat called La Washerie, and she is the unofficial cheerleader for the original 13 colonies. And this costume is made out of both new and found materials. It's a living sculpture. All of my costumes are living sculpture. I continue to add to them. I didn't have every, just because I'm the costume designer from the beginning, it doesn't mean I have the biggest understanding of the show. I was learning about the show. We all were. Taylor was, the musicians, everyone involved. We were all really learning about what this show is along the way. And so as I really, really learned and I had revelations, I would continue adding. I would take something away and I might add something. Maybe I just add. Um, but like down below, like the panniers, quote unquote. I mean, yes, it's hooping wire, but this laundromat literally was throwing away these grand opening flags just down the street from where I was living at the time in Brooklyn. And they were literally throwing them into the garbage. I was like, hey, can I have those? I was like, sure. And they were also throwing the wig, the macaron. The wig is also those shiny flags that you see on at laundromats and like car parking lots and all of that stuff. They were throwing all of it away only to put up more. And I loved how nature kind of had its way. This is actually fairly early. A lot of those flags don't even exist anymore. They fell off during performances and I never found them to glue them back on. There's the lucky 13 in the back. This is a radical fairy realness ritual sacrifice. I just love the number 13 and the 13 original colonies. And then of course that backpack with all of the little, that's kind of like, 4th of July, Independence Day. There's that. The costume on the right, that's our Gibson girl who during the Oklahoma land rush. And it's hard to get into the conceptual stuff in this picture. But that's the Oklahoma land rush in my mind. Next slide. And then on the left, we have our Civil War decade costume. And this one is actually fairly simple compared to some of them. But I will say everyone loves the hot dog. I love the hot dog. Doing my research for this project, I was interested in what was new at the time, what was being invented at the time that changed things. And I was reading a story about how the American hot dog was like kind of came about during this time, during the Civil War, by German immigrants selling their sausages in buns on the streets. And I'm like, well, that's a great story. Whether it's true or not, I don't know, but it's a great story anyway. So I'm using it. And also that kind of, if you look at the skirt, you'll see that it's like barbed wire. You can start to see the design. That kind of barbed wire was invented during this time. I don't know what they were using before. And so I kind of combined those two things, and the concept of this costume is, the Civil War. Hopefully we can eat through what is separating us, between, the North and the South, slavery, non-slavery, all of it. And I just continued all the way up. I mean, hot dogs. I mean, is that blood or is it ketchup? Is it mayonnaise or is it like something else? I mean, is it mustard or is it bile? I mean, I don't know. One of my friends saw the show and he was comparing that skirt to like entrails and like, the guts of like fallen soldiers, mutilated, bodies. Then the nice little like jacket on top. You can't see the detailing, but it's very much, it's like I use a lot of detailing from the soldier outfits at the time, which to this day, like band costumes, like high school band, marching band, are still kind of patterned off of this soldier's uniform to today. On the right, we have an early version of the Reconstruction decade, which happened right after the Civil War. Right now in so you have 3 inventions during Reconstruction. You have the typewriter. So I made this fun, like a little top So it's upside down because he's typing something out and it's coming out down below to cover up, the bits. And up on top, two other things that were invented during this time were dynamite and toilet paper on rolls, which I think is hilarious. So I took empty toilet paper rolls, you know, little cardboards, and I painted them to look like dynamite. And I put like fuses on them, and I put them in the mess of all of that ribbon. And I called it a wig, and it's hilarious. It does the job. It's lightweight. It's funny. I like funny. Funny is always good. Funny is something that we need more of. I think laughter is healing. If you can get a good laugh in anywhere, in theater or anytime, I think it's a good idea. Next slide, please. Let me know if I'm like running out of time. I don't even know where we are. Oh my God. Okay. You let me know. I'm not even sure how much we have left. Yes, I'm a costume designer. Actually, what I like to say is I'm an artist trapped in the role of costume designer. Because I really am more of an artist than a costume designer. I build worlds. It's all about ideas. The tailor's wearing a lot of ideas. When I'm out at the Mermaid Parade, I'm wearing a lot of like ideas, stories layered on top of each other. This is a picture from the first set that I ever did with Taylor was for our holiday show, which came the year after the first time we did our 24 decade show, not 24-hour show. So this is what we call this holiday sauce. And Taylor wrote this show about his drag mother and my good friend who passed. Her name is Mother Flawless Sabrina. And this is more about the holidays according to queer people, the kind of queer people who are not accepted by their families, the kind of queer people who were thrown out of their homes, the kind of queer people who, find agency in their chosen families, that kind of holiday. That's the show that we're giving. And so here we are. You can't see the whole thing, but anyway, the scenic, it was fun. Taylor's wearing it looks like maybe like Medusa or whatever, but what they really are like severed fingers, and the severed fingers are actually hanging around the neck. And I love like, the extreme, like, oh my God, the violence, like the pig, the roasted pig with the apple, like epaulettes on the shoulders. And there's little like elves. If you see the little like more panniers, I love my panniers. Little elf hands reaching towards the bow, the prize like down below. Of course, I love rain curtains. That's why, and he's actually coming out of a cauldron that has gurgling sounds at the top of the show. Next slide, please. So this slide is a mistake. I did not design this set. I designed the costumes. This is the show that we closed when COVID hit. It's called The Fray, and you probably didn't see it, but maybe you did. But the whole thing was set into a ball pit. And anyway, next slide, please. I love that Rachel thought that I did that. Designing for the screen. So on the left, well, let's stay with Taylor for a minute, and then I'll okay, year 2020, I left Maui, I came back, I didn't have any work, my relationship was over. And then Taylor called me, and it's like, oh, we have a project. It was like, I think the only work that I got that year. And we went out into the woods in upstate New York, and Taylor was reciting Walt Whitman poetry, but in nature. And we called it Whitman in the Woods. And you can look it up online on All Arts. I think it's still there. I haven't seen it in a while. But so I made Taylor all of these Walt Whitman inspired outfits, or outfits that were inspired by Walt Whitman's poetry, or I should say my understanding of the stories that he was telling. And, it's wacky. And it's colorful and it's fun. And I have to say that I really love film. I love live performance, but there's something about film that I really like too. It might not be live, but if you do it right, it's just as good as a live performance, and you actually get to capture a moment. A live performance, it comes and goes, and unless you come back to another, the same show the next day or whenever, you never really get to see it again. And even if you do, it's not the same show. um, Film is magic that way. And also, if there are mistakes, you can fix them. If costume malfunctions happen, but if it's in film, you have time to correct it, if you don't want it. Often in Taylor Mac land, if something was malfunctioning, then we would just like keep it. It's like it added to the experience. I do love making things that fall apart or deconstruct in front of you. I like things that change on stage. Sometimes that's intentional, but sometimes it isn't. But then, fabulous accidents do happen. Anyway, so on the left, I did my first real like feature film. The director and creator of this film, called Once Within a Time, is Godfrey Reggio, who some of you might know, who was famous for Koyaanisqatsi in the early, I believe, the early 80s. And then he had a series similar of films after that. But I was called, this was I'm going to say this is last summer that I was called, and they asked me to make something very specific. We have this character, and he's like a salesman, but we need like these large teeth, almost like these denture kind of things. And that's, while I was being interviewed, I knew exactly how I was going to make it. And so I make the prototype, which ended up being more than the prototype. It ended up being what we actually used. And there's like, I love it. I love it. And then they asked me to make the rest of the costumes in the whole film. And so I was like, yay. What you're looking at right now, the big picture, this character, her name is Mother Muse. And she's just like this beautiful figure. Everything is on green screen. They made all of these miniature models. It's very, very artistic. If you go into the galleries at the Museum of Arts and Design, you can see a bit of a sizzle reel, and you can see like the process, what I was doing. And the woman who wore this is this amazing Persian performer. She's like the Persian equivalent of, let's say, like Diamanda Galas, if you know who she is. It's a really interesting voice. And anyway, so she was Mother Muse, which is like this tree, kind of like this tree figure, as you can see. And the headdress is actually too heavy to wear. It was actually attached to the ceiling and hanging there. And we put it at just the right level so that she could like stand up straight, put her head into it, and kind of like perform and do what she needed to do. Anyway, the film Once Within a Time will be featured like original music by Godfrey Reggio, Philip Glass, is being released at the Santa Fe Film Festival in October, on October 21st. So I think I might be flying there the day after my album release party, which is October 21st at Joe's Pub. Treasure, you should come to that. Okay, next screen. Oh, so here's Taylor Mac again. And so during the pandemic, everything, we were reduced to screens and Zooms, and people weren't gathering. And so our holiday sauce show, that first year in 2020, I decided I was feeling very, I had all of that natural stuff happen, like from Hawaii, and what I was feeling like nature. And I've always been drawn to these, these Archimboldo portraits. And so that's what we did with Taylor that year. I really wanted him to be like camouflaged within all of this stuff. And luckily the our makeup artist, her name is Anastasia Durasova, she was up for doing it. I'm like, this is what I want Taylor to look like. She's like, hey, I'm up for it. It just means that Taylor has to sit for 3 hours. And I'm like, Taylor, do you want to sit for 3 hours to achieve this? And he's like, oh, hell yes. And so we did. But yeah, these are the kind of worlds that I'm really interested in creating. It's like, just, I don't know, it's very maximalist. It's very colorful. You could get lost in it. You can get seduced by it. Yeah, this is like an example. This is like a perfect image to me. I love it so much. Um, I even like the legs down at the bottom. I think that's hilarious. Okay, next slide. Oh, okay. I think we're coming up close to the end here, but so finally, I am a singer-songwriter. I've been writing songs for years. And in 2019, I told you it was a busy year. Guggenheim Works in Process invited me to do a show, and I decided, oh, well, I'm finally going to do my music. And so I told them I'm doing a rock and roll cabaret, and they were like, "Machine, we love your visual work." And I'm like, "Okay, I know." Well, my time slot for my show just happened to be during Fashion Week, September 2019. So it only made sense to do a fashion show. Ba-dum-bum. And so, I was rehearsing with the band for months, really getting the music solid. And then I decided I'm making outfits that are inspired by the stories that I'm telling. It's almost like I was inspiring myself. Which is really just like, which of course it came naturally because the show was about my mother and my relationship with her and kind of what she left behind to me, after she died. My mother used to tell me, "You remind me of me, you remind me of me," and that made her nervous. But I think everything worked out. And so I wrote a show for her, and it includes other songs that are related to my coming out experience, and don't forget that means coming out to yourself too. That's actually the most important part of coming out. And I don't know, there she is, there's her picture right there. I think that was her junior year in high school, and she has the cat eyes and everything. The show is the looks are very inspired by her coming of age and my coming of age. She was born in like the late 40s, so her coming of age was like the 50s and the 60s. So we have those silhouettes in there and those ideas. And then I was born in the early 70s, so I'm in like the late 70s and the 80s. And so it was very like kind of like electric, and so you get both of those in there, and just a few other concepts like the concept of like water and like ocean and ocean creatures, and then also traveling. We moved around a lot growing up, and so just traveling, looking for a better place, a place to be happy, and just a sense of like going west, and then everything that kind of like happened along the way. All of the models had luggage to carry with their look. And that's a neon sign. The set for the show was literally a bunch of moving boxes and then that neon sign. That was the set. And I would love to do the show again, but I just recorded the album finally, and it was just mastered literally just yesterday. I got the final masters, and so I'm releasing the album on October 21st at Joe's Pub, and you'll be able to listen to it on Bandcamp and maybe Spotify. But if you go to the Museum of Art and Design, you can get a sneak peek of those songs over in the treasure section, because there's a whole section where all of those costumes from Treasure are there with the luggage and everything, and the neon sign is there too. Is there another slide? Is there more? Well, and like I was saying, get your peach to the Museum of Arts and Design and see this show. People are really liking it. Can we talk about how my fake hair in the picture kind of looks like my natural hair right now? I was kind of trying to be like my mother in that picture, but an example of just like, so that coat is like, it's like a swing coat that I made out of an American flag that I painted and dyed. And the flowers on it are actually from a dumpster at the cemetery where my mother is buried. The last time I was there visiting her was, I don't know, I actually think it was early 2019. And there I was visiting with Mom, and there was a dumpster, and I was like, oh my God, well, can't keep a good queen down. And I went over to the dumpster, and it was like, it was filled with like fake flowers that had been on grave sites for like probably years. And what do? They threw away the old fake flowers and they put on new fake flowers. And I'm like, I love these fake flowers, and kind of like the balloons from earlier, how nature has its way and they deteriorate, a lot of these flowers are just like, sun bleached and tattered, and they're fabric and they're fraying on the edges, and I just love them. The dress actually has the image of my mother's portrait from her senior year of high school. The wig is made out of about 3,000 pipe cleaners. And what's great about that is like they bend, so you can like kind of like keep restyling it. Anyway, I had a swatch fetish in the early 80s. That's why I was wearing all the swatches, kind of like how they used to do in the ads. That was definitely a moment where, you look at advertising and it's ridiculous and it really is just trying to get you to buy something, but then somehow in fantasy, it's actually what you want to wear. You kind of want to wear the fantasy, not the reality. I mean, how many people wear multiple watches at the same time? It's completely impractical and silly, but I don't know, there's something I liked about that look of the swatch back in the day. I still like swatches. That must be the last slide. That must be the last one. Is it the last one? It is.
Fabulous. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Now, do you have a couple of minutes to see if anyone has any questions for you?
Sure. I might as well.
Okay.
We're over an hour, so I'm sorry I blabbed forever, but that's how I am. What are you going to do?
You don't have to go on long, but if anybody wants to have a question or make a comment, please raise your hand down and we'll unmute you and let you go. I have a question.
Yeah.
So when you do costumes for theater, they have to be washed, right?
They do?
Don't or do
I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, no, I generally what I do is I create, depending on what it is. There's usually a layer that's touching the skin that gets washed, and then there's something that goes over it. And I'm way more interested in what goes over it. Vodka spray is my friend. Sometimes you replace things. And yeah. A lot of things, sometimes it is very satisfying to be able to like submerge something in like hot soapy water and really like clean it, and that is very satisfying. And some things hold up to that and some things don't. So I do have that in mind when I'm designing, but it's not I'm not going to let that keep me from making something that I want to make. There's always a way.
Great.
There's a question. What is your most recent and thrilling discovery?
Okay, this kind of goes back to this fun story that I was going to tell. It's kind of like it's a discovery / revelation. 3 days ago, before I came to Sonoma, I got a text from Diane von Furstenberg, and she's like, call me as soon as you can. And so I call her, it goes to voice message. I texted her back, I call her again, she picks up. She's like, Machine, hi, how are you? She didn't even know about my show at MAD, but she's been out of the city, so she's gonna go to MAD. But she's like, Machine, I am going to a costume party in October, and the theme is futurism. And I was like futurism. And I was like, okay. And she's like, I don't want all that like I don't want like that white or like silver. I don't want any of that Star Wars stuff. I don't want like aluminum foil. She's like, mushrooms are the future. And it's like, what she is. I'm just like, you see mushrooms more than ever, like into like medicine and like coffee substitutes and like all this, like mushrooms are the future. And like we talked about like that shroud that you can buy. When you die, you cover your body in it and you become mushrooms. You can do the same thing and become a tree. And I was like, oh, yeah, mushrooms are the future. So it really put my mind back into, it's like that constant reminder that nature wins, you know, at the end of the day. I don't know if that really answers the question, what's my most recent discovery? Except that I love making fake mushrooms right now. And that's but I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you how I'm doing it. Not yet. I need to make it. I need to make this thing, and then I'll share it. But I'm not going to say how I'm doing it. But I discovered how to make really good fake mushrooms. Because you go online and people make them, and it's always like the red cap with a little white dot, and it's like, do you think it could be a little more creative? Mushrooms come in all shapes and sizes. Although I will say that Dan is like, look, make sure that they look like mushrooms. So I don't want to have to describe to all these idiots all night that they're mushrooms. You know, I want them to be obvious mushrooms. I'm like, yes, they'll look like mushrooms. Because you know, mushrooms come in all shapes and sizes. Sometimes they look like weird little squiggles or blobs. They're mushrooms. They don't really look like mushrooms, you know?
All sizes. So
Yeah.
Peter Shepard, I'm going to allow you to talk.
Hi, Peter.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. I'm missing you. For everyone,
gosh.
I know this person. I know this person in real life.
Can you see me right now?
No, I can see. There's a picture of you with the yo sign in Brooklyn.
Well, I'm working on my Taylor Mac marionette, so
Of course you are.
I can't wait
Did
for
you
you.
figure out the acrylic gloss? Did you get it?
I have to pick it up tomorrow, but I've done all the orange and the blue, and it's gonna look. I mean, you inspire me, and just you know, I don't really have a question, but I've been to your show, and I'm bringing friends actually twice because everybody really wants to see it, and it's so incredible. Everyone must go see this, and thank you for just motivating me to create.
Oh, thanks. Anytime. If you need inspiration, I will say, like, come to my studio, tell me what you're working on, and you're probably going to leave confused because I'm probably going to give you more ideas than you need to hear. But that's what I do. I'm like, well, you could do that, like, you could do this like 100 different ways. This is how I would do it. I would use all 100 ways. I would find a way to get every idea in there somehow. But that's the queer maximalist in me. I can't help it.
Barbara
Playing
Baxby,
with my hair.
you're allowed to talk, Barbara, and then Naomi Tarantel.
Okay, so the slide with the Hi Mom neon thingy,
Mm-hmm.
the headpiece, you've got two animals sticking out where Princess Leia's buns would have been. What are the
Exactly.
animals?
I think they're bobcats.
Ah, blue ones.
Well, you know, we're in fantasy lands. We're
Yes,
in
of course.
make believe. So, I'm not going to make them look real, you know, because we already have reality. I don't need to give you reality. I need to give you fantasy. I need to give you I need to give you something you haven't seen before.
Which is what we all want.
Princess Leia, growing up as, like, you know, little gay boy, queer boy, I mean, I was always attracted to the female lead in films and in situations. Like, I always really admired my teachers. Of course, I loved Princess Leia in Star Wars. She is like one of the most iconic looks and characters of all time. I was, you know, finally in my, you know, I'm like, oh, I can live out, I can do whatever I want. I can live out my that was in the show. I actually, when I came out, that was after my costume change. I was like, thank you everyone for allowing me to, you know, live out my Xanadu and Princess Leia fantasies, which I definitely have. Xanadu is my favorite movie of my youth, and there's really just fun fashion in it, really great dancing, the best soundtrack that you could ever ask for. And I really loved Olivia Newton-John. And so, like, the dress was very Xanadu inspired, but the headdress was, you know, very, of course, Princess Leia inspired. I will say all of the animals. Okay, so something that I didn't talk about in this particular webinar, those animals, those are taxidermy forms. If you know taxidermy, then you know. But you know, let's say you go hunting and you have an animal skin. You can stretch it over these forms that are available, like online or wherever. And in the story, telling the story about my mother and myself growing up, the way we moved all over, North America, I chose specifically North American animals, just to help tell the American story. And I think I'm pretty sure those two are bobcats. Excuse me, but there are cougars, there are mountain lions, of course. There's the rattlesnakes, there's the eagle, there are bobcats. Trying to think of all of the other animals that are involved. Anyway, you get the idea. And so those are actually these foam taxidermy forms that that's what I made them out of. I'm fascinated by them. I first ran across them in a Bruce Nauman sculpture, like, oh my God, like at least 30 years ago. And there was this weird thing, and it was like turning around, and he had like these weird forms in there, and they looked like deer. And it turns out years later, I discovered what they are. It's like, yeah, they're like these weird taxidermy forms. And I don't know if anyone knows the sculpture that I'm talking about. I'm pretty sure it was probably at the MoMA, probably, I don't know, in the mid 90s, probably. Anyway.
Naomi, do you have a comment?
Come on, Naomi.
There's someone that wrote, don't see that hand up anymore. No, there's someone wrote anonymously, no question, just a comment. You are fabulous. Love, love, love the creativity and stories behind all your creations.
Thank you.
Wow.
Come see the show if you haven't already.
And there's one other question. Luella West said, fantastic, inspiring presentation, 3 exclamation marks. What current project are you working on at the Haystack Farm?
So, of course, I brought my mushroom project with me to work in on my Airbnb by night. But so Haystack Farm, as I mentioned earlier, is it's a charity-based farm, and everything goes to food pantries, the vegetables and the flowers. Once a year, they have a harvest festival. And I am creating large-scale art and moments on the property. It's the most beautiful property I think I've ever seen. I'm really lucky to be working on it. For example, last year, I did this. If you know what farm terminology is, I took a hoop house, which is like kind of like this covered. It's kind of like this. It's like a tube, but like cut in half, and then it's like these arches, and that it gets covered, and you grow things in them on farms. Anyway, I took a hoop house and I turned it into like this wind chime tunnel. And we're in Sonoma, and there's a lot of wineries around. And so I went and got all of these bottles, empty, used bottles, and I cleaned all of them. I took the labels off. I cut all of them, cleaned them again to make them, safe. They were sharp. And then I turned them into wind chimes, and I did like at least 1,000 of them. And I just did this whole like wind chime tunnel. And I made the little clappers out of like wooden beads and like little like mirrors and other things that catch the wind. And, things like that. I also made a huge 10-foot in diameter orb, kind of like a rebar, like orb. It's not rebar. It's a hollow. I forget what they call it. It's just hollow tubing. It's actually really lightweight, but it really is 10 foot in diameter. And I cover it in chicken wire. And then I attach all of these dried flowers from the farm. It takes a lot, actually. The surface area is more than you might think it is. And then we hoisted it up with like this tractor arm, and we put it on a disco ball motor so that it kind of represented the moon. Farming is all about like, the moon and cycles. And so so it's like sculpture, but it has to do with the farm. This year I'm making really large scale pinwheels and putting them in places. I designed these bandanas. I'm wearing one right now. I went to the flower person and I was like, well, who are the stars for each season? I designed 4 bandanas, one for each season. This one is fall. And ta-da. And I just took like clip art. These aren't for sale, so I just like use whatever clip art I found. And you can see like, Haystack Farm. You can see like, the cycles of the moon. Um, Roses, they kind of, in Sonoma, they just kind of keep going through. Like, corn. There are oak trees on the property. They're amazing. Ants are really important. Ladybugs are important. Are these magnolias? I forget which flowers they are. The flower person told me which one. Squash, of course, there's a squash, the gourds, everywhere. Sun is important. Anyway, and the little hands. Oh, look at the little helping hands. So I did that. I just had a meeting with Carol today, and she has a lot of new ideas that I am processing. The Hoedown Festival is on October 8th this year. It's a private event. It's not open to the public. Otherwise, I'd invite you. But
You're definitely busy. So Naomi came back. Naomi,
Okay.
why don't you wrap it up for us tonight?
Sure. Yeah, this was so amazing. I'm a huge fan of Taylor Max, and I'm so glad that I had so many laughs tonight. I really needed them. And and I'm really glad that I persisted with the speakers committee and in having you be one of our speakers, because they kept on saying, oh, he's so busy, but you were here tonight, and it was fantastic. I was at the procession with Little Amal on Saturday at Lincoln Center, and I just was wondering about the bee theme. Where did that come from?
So there I was on a Zoom with St. Anne's Warehouse and the National Queer Theater, the people who are like, brought Little Amal here. And they were asking me, well, we want you to meet Little Amal, you can, you have this show, you're going to represent the Museum of Arts and Design and yourself, you're going to walk out of the museum in Columbus Circle and Little Amal is going to be there. So what do you think we should do? And I was like looking around and I'm like, well, of course I wanted it to be amazing and big and weird. And I like right to the side of me on the floor was this bee puppet that I had made for, there's the installation, the Natasha Bowden installation, like the flower headdresses and all the color. I'd mentioned before that all of the models had like little like puppets during part of the fashion show inside of Natasha's installation. Well, I had made a little swarm of bees puppet, and in the performance, there was this handle, and there are all these like wiggly wires, and there are all these like bees, and so the model would like run like from like the swarm of bees, and I was like, "What about bees?" And I'm like, "Bees," and so I had to ask the people, who travel with Little Amal all over the world. It's like, well, I've seen different things. I've seen lights, I've seen creatures, I've seen fun things. Has she ever encountered bees? Because Little Amal is a 10-year-old, Syrian refugee, and she's, always looking for something, but she has discoveries along the way. So I was kind of like a discovery along the way. And I just love the idea of bees and about how bees are important to human survival. And I think that bees, I can't think of a better example on Earth of, organisms coming together for a cause. Bees really, they come together and they work together for a cause, and they stick together. And, it's very interesting. And so considering the plight of Little Amal, I thought that was kind of perfect. And then the Museum of Arts and Design has bees on the roof. So it was just kind of bees are amazing. And so I decided to meet Little Amal as a colony of bees. And so I kind of dressed my body in like gold sequins. So it was like I was the honey. And there were like bees, little like bee clusters all over me. And then I managed with help from, St. Anne's and National Queer Theater. I was able to gather about 20 people together to have like bee puppets. And it ended up being really, really magical. We met her in Columbus Circle, and then we walked up to Lincoln Center. We had moments. I haven't seen it yet. There was one really beautiful moment where she was really close to the fountain in Lincoln Center, and someone was close, puppeting this little cluster of bees, and they reached her hands out. And it was just like, it's just the way she reached her hands out, and she was just like curious about the bees, and she loved the bees. And then there was this little boy next to me who was like, she loves the bees. And it just broke my heart. I started getting emotional, and I'm like, bees, bees, bees. So anyway, that's the whole story. I'm very glad I did it. I was really exhausted after my opening, and then I went right into making the outfit and organizing that. So I was actually very tired that day, but but it was amazing. Little Amal is the whole thing. It's really a phenomenon, and I'm following her, on Instagram. And just before this, she went live. I actually didn't even see where she was, but crowds of people gathered to witness this. And what I love about puppets in general is that as soon as there's a puppet, everyone is in the land of make-believe. And we're all really kind of believing what we're seeing, and, believing this story that they're telling, or making our own stories in our head. And it's a really interesting, magical space to be in. It's another kind of like healing place. It's a great place to tell stories and teach people things in a very human way, even though what we're seeing is not human, but